Six teams at the moment looking in contention for relegation from the Championship this season. We've discounted Luton Town for the moment. Depending on how things develop at Kenilworth Road, they may be considered part of that relegation scramble, but I personally think they're a little bit too good to be considered. So, at the moment, the teams that we're most worried about would be Portsmouth, of course, who are at the bottom, but they did get that crucial victory, 3-1 victory over Preston North End at the weekend. North End themselves, of course, are in the conversation as well. QPR, I think, are in big trouble. Hull City, a lot of pressure over Tim Volter, their current manager. Plymouth Argyle as well, with that shocking away record, although they did manage to get themselves a point at the weekend at Derby County, who, along with Oxford United, will be relieved to be outside that relegation equation. But we're also considering Cardiff City in the as part of the dogfight after back-to-back defeats for Omar Reetz's side. Is Omar Reetz still going to get the permanent job? Lots of questions to ask then on this Championship podcast. Yes, welcome along to this EFL Debate Championship podcast. If you could get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify, and even hit the notification bell, that would help us out a lot. But for now, I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host in a very good mood this evening, Ollie Mann, after that 1-0 victory over Sheffield Wednesday in the Steel City Derby on Sunday. Were you out with Chris Wilder on Sunday night?
I wish. I would have loved to be in that pub. I think I know which pub it was, one that's not too far from me. And if I'd realised a little bit earlier, maybe it would have been a perfect way to be spending my evening drinking with Joe Root, with Chris Wilder, and just, toasting to a great win. I think it's one of those where the game was rubbish. I don't think any neutral that watched it will have sat there and gone, Jesus, this is a high quality performance by either team. But yeah, it just feels fantastic to be on the winning end of that again. I think I saw today as well that Wilder's broke the record for the longest unbeaten run by any manager in Steel City derbies, which, that's no mean feat. And so he deserved his drink on Sunday night and his toast to sausage rolls.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been difficult to lose to Jos Lahukai Sheffield Wednesday at Bramall Lane, wouldn't it? When they parked the bus. I don't know whether Lee Bullen or another Sheffield Wednesday manager might have done. They did that a couple of times when you were, a few years ago. So it would have been difficult to lose those games. But no, I think all credit to Chris Wilder. It's interesting, isn't it, that thing of having a manager who's also a fan, and you can see. Do you know what? I was kind of in two minds sort of watching this video of Chris Wilder standing up on the tables, because there is a sort of logical part of me that thinks, should a manager be doing that? And, the kind of, it's long, it's only 3 points, there's a long way to go, you don't want to get. Yeah. But then there's also the kind of the romanticist in me kind of loves that. I don't think we see much of that in football nowadays. A manager really being one of the fans. And that sort of romanticism really called out to me, I have to say.
Yeah, it's one of those where you can flip either way. And I'll be honest, all jokes aside, I've enjoyed myself. I've had a little bit of fun. But I think, you've got to look at it in two minds, because obviously there is the side of this that says this is a bit, is it over the top? Is it embarrassing, as some fans would claim? Is it unprofessional, the way that they've gone about that?
Yeah. I suppose it's embarrassing if Chris Wilder is the opposition manager.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Mr. Professional has lost to him. So what were you thinking? But I think if
Danny Rowe was in the pub singing "Wednesday Till I Die," I think so it's yeah.
You absolutely love it. If it's your club, you'll love it. And especially after you've won. And I think as well, the other underlying thing here is that there's now a 2-week break. We're not playing again for 2 weeks. We've got the international break, so he's not got to be in training. He's not got to be leading the players in training today. It's very much there is a gap now. So they are allowed to go out and enjoy this moment. I don't think they would have done it if they were still playing Tuesday night or if they were playing next Saturday. This was a circumstantial situation where it's paid off. I think as a fan of the club, you love to see it, because you want to have that connection. It's why when I get asked the question, I didn't want Chris Wilder to come back to United. I've been very open and honest about that. And I was wrong. I will be open, frank. I was wrong, because it was 100% the right decision. And it's why I've always said that when United are successful, I didn't think it would happen, but I wanted us to be successful with Wilder. And it's because of that connection with the fans. It drives the passion. It means that the fans can really be bought into everything that the club's doing because they know the man at the helm of it is exactly the same as I was. That's exactly how I felt on Sunday night. At full time, I wanted to go down to one knee and fist pump. I wanted to go out afterwards and sing songs and just have a lovely time with my friends, celebrating the fact that we'd won. And so it's great on that personal connection. It's fantastic for the club. On the professional side of it, do I think Pep Guardiola would do the same thing? No, I don't think he would. But there's a reason that this works at Sheffield United in a way that it wouldn't work for one of those elite clubs. And so for me, it's innocent. I understand why it would rile people up, but beat us next time and then you can enjoy it.
Very fair. Delighted to be joined now by Plymouth Argyle fan Joe Bell from Argyle Life and the Green and White podcast. Joe, thanks so much for joining us this evening. I mean, you did manage to get yourselves an away point on the board at the weekend, so that they all count. But I suppose a little bit fortunate to get the result.
Yeah, evening, Gab. Evening, Ollie. To some extent, I mean, I watched the game live, and this is why I don't ever get hung up on statistics and XGs and all this crap, because I actually don't think it told the true story. Look, I accept that Derby were the better team across the course of the game, but I don't necessarily think it's as one-sided as statistics would make out. Look, Derby were the team who went forward second half. We did incredibly well to get back into it via the softest free kick given of the weekend and the biggest deflection you'll see all season. But look, when you're down where we are and when you're as bad as we are on the road, you've got to take every slice of luck you can get. So, yeah, I mean, second half we could have perhaps opened up a little bit more. We could have perhaps come forward a little bit more. But one trend I've noticed this year, Gab, is that last year when games were open and stretched, I often found that was when we were at our best. This year, I'm noticing alarmingly so that when the games are opened and stretched, we are so vulnerable. We're all at sixes and sevens when, there were times where it was just back and forth. It was a basketball game and we looked all at sea in both directions, to be frank. The one thing that does frustrate me on the road is we need to remember that football is the most cherished possession of those footballers' lives, and they give it away far too easily away from home. But look, it's a step in the right direction. And after what came 7 days previous at Ellen Road, to come out of the next 2 games with 4 points, I think we can be fairly satisfied. And it just ends that horror block of fixtures with a little bit of a positive going into the little mini break now.
Yeah, I think there's a real message in there, particularly around that, because I was quite vocal. I was really down on Argyle after the game at Leeds. I'll be honest, I felt that it showed a lack of ambition. I felt that it was just folding your cards up and saying that we'll just not bother about this one. Don't worry about it. And I felt that wasn't a way that you can approach any game in the Championship. But getting 4 points from the 2 games after it validate that decision. All of a sudden, it doesn't matter because you were going to lose at Ellen Road anyway. What we did is maximised his points from the next 2 games, made sure we were coming at it. And actually beating those teams around you is probably where Plymouth will be able to stay up. That's where they're going to make a difference. It's the games against Portsmouth and Derby rather than the games against Leeds. So I can completely understand that. I think for me, there's still this question, because I think you're right about the game at the weekend. I think the stats probably do tell a bit of a distorted picture. But there is still that overarching thing for me that is away from home. I think you've scored 2 goals this season, both from about 35 yards. That is something that you would potentially suggest isn't sustainable. Do you see anything in what Argyle are trying to do, even just in the game against Derby the other day, that makes you feel as though they are closer to getting it right away from home rather than just relying on pot shots that are going to try and sort of get you the goals there?
Not particularly, no. Not on what we've seen. We went away to Millwall in a really Millwall-esque game, if you like, if we were to coin the phrase. I mean, it all comes down to a little bit of luck, and I'm not going to sit here and cry wolf. Look, Obafemi was through one-on-one at Cardiff after 10 minutes. If that goes in, it's a different game. Of course, we then folded like a pack of cards afterwards. At Millwall, we were initially awarded a penalty after 20 seconds, only for the referee then to incorrectly rule it out for the wrong reason. And then we go on to lose the game. But if you look across the piece, in particular, this last block of fixtures, because in the previous block, we'd gone away to Burnley, we'd gone away to West Brom. The West Brom performance in particular actually showed a lot more character than we have in any game on the road this season. We stood up to an incredible barrage in the first half. And actually, in the last 15 minutes of that game, there was probably only ever really going to be one team going to score. Albeit, as you say, Ollie, it probably would have had to have come from about 40 yards out via a huge deflection. The Burnley game was then a little bit frustrating because, again, we didn't really go for it. The ambition word is probably the one. It was almost like we were in a little bit of fear that, if we come out, we're going to get done. And that's a mental block. And this block of fixtures has been truly horrid on the road. Cardiff was just as bad as it comes. Millwall was a really dire watch, but that played into Millwall's hands. And Leeds was, as you say, it was a non-event. Look, I support the team selection personally because we had a huge amount of injuries. We were literally down to the bare bones in that game. Nobody in the city thought even if we played our best team, we would stand a chance unless something crazy happened in that game. So he put all his eggs in one basket. Luckily for him, he's come out smelling of roses. But let's bear in mind, coming out of those two games, we were dire at home against Portsmouth, really, and it's taken Route 1 football, which I think we can all appreciate is great to have it back in the game, to get the goal to win the game. And then it's taken a huge deflection and a soft free kick to get back into it on Saturday. What I will say about Saturday was there was a little shoot of, crumb of comfort, if you like, because the first 10 minutes was probably the best 10 minutes we've played on the road all season. We looked really comfortable. We looked confident. We didn't really allow Derby to influence themselves on the game. We gave away a cheap corner. We didn't clear it. They got a second corner. And then before you know it, Jerry Yates is pinging one in over his shoulder. And it's a wonderful goal.
Yeah.
So that rocked us back. But actually, what really pleased me was they didn't fold like they have done on the road this year. They picked themselves up. They weathered a storm. And Derby did really come at us. And it looked like it was just going to be another one of those days. But they got over it and they got through. But look, I'm campaigning for a sports psychologist because I think it's mental with Argyle on the road. I purely think it's psychological. I don't think any other reason can be had. They've tried everything. They've travelled up on Thursdays. They've travelled up on Fridays. They flew. They've drove. They've got the train, and we still can't get results. So something fundamentally is wrong. But this isn't a Wayne Rooney thing. This is a history thing. Plymouth Argyle on the road has always been a bit of a soft touch, if you like. Stephen Schumacher bucked the trend in League One in that title-winning season. There have been the odd different season in there. Paul Sturrock's season, for example, we were really good on the road. But look, that's going back 20 years. And football's changed, football's evolved. And unfortunately, Plymouth's a lovely place to live, but equally we can't pick it up and move it further inland to make these trips a lot more bearable. So, and the flip side to it, and Wayne Rooney's alluded to it, is that home park is such a tough place to come and opposition teams struggle when they come to us. So it's, perhaps it evens itself out when we go away from home.
Set piece defending then, Joe. Because you mentioned that the Jerry Yates goal rocked you back, and I agree with you. It's a lovely finish. I noticed that all bar one was defending the set piece, and to my eyes, it wasn't like you even had a couple of players on the edge of the area ready to sort of push out and be aggressive. It was literally everyone back defending the cross. And for me, I actually think that makes life harder for defenders rather than easier, because you've almost got more players in the way. You don't know who you're supposed to mark because everyone's supposed to be marking everyone a little bit. And actually, I think that can make life more difficult for defenders. So for me, that's kind of what I would question in terms of the set piece policy from Plymouth Argyle, in terms of just maybe inviting pressure and not having enough outlets to occupy the opposition.
No, I totally agree, Gab. Look, Wayne Rooney said in his fans forum before a ball was kicked, I'm a brave coach. I'll sometimes leave 4 up on the halfway line, so they've got to leave 5 back. Well, he hasn't done it yet, and he's not shown any signs of leaving anybody back, let alone 4. So look, I think it is a problem, and If you take this goal in particular, Julio Pleguezuelo, when he comes out to head, it slips and loses footing. But then you sum it up perfectly, because then Callum Wright and Cornell Such, because there's not a huge amount of space in that 6-yard box, they're both going for the same header. It almost comes off each other and just rebounds straight to Jerry Yates. Now, as you say, if you have less bodies in the box itself, you have more space to move about, or if you're picking up a man, you're just tracking that man. I don't quite understand what the policy is at set pieces. I don't know if we're zonal. I don't know if we're man for man. I don't quite know what we're trying to do. But equally, from an attacking set piece point of view, I know we scored from a free kick via deflection. Listless is probably the word. We don't really, if we get a corner or a free kick at home park, I'm sat back in my seat thinking, well, I ain't sitting forward for this, because the best we can hope for is a corner. We just don't carry a threat, and set pieces are such an integral part of the game, and particularly when you're going away and you are sort of setting up a little bit of shop and you're not showing that ambition. Set pieces are huge. They're potentially the outball. At Leeds, when you're playing six at the back and you're playing 10 behind the ball, you rely on your set pieces.
Yeah.
We had 2 set pieces in the first half. They didn't even clear the first man. We didn't even win the first contact. Now, that isn't good enough. And that was always going to be the outball. We were playing for set pieces and we couldn't do it. So both defending and attacking has been a real weakness. And Ollie's right. It's not sustainable to expect 35-yard pot shots every now and again, because it's just not going to happen, is it?
How has Morgan Whittaker found it in this system, Joe? I mean, has he had a bit more joy at home park in terms of playing in a team that finds it easier to commit numbers forward in transition, which maybe you do a little bit better at home rather than away?
I think he's really struggling, Gab, and
Really?
I'm not even sure if it's a system thing. I just think he's so short of confidence. And the one thing that we've seen with our own eyes the last couple of years is a happy, free Morgan Whittaker is one of the best players in the Football League.
Yeah.
And we're just not seeing it at the moment. And that's, it's obvious what's happening. Teams are doubling up on him, sometimes even tripling up on him. They're just stopping his threat. The problem is then you look at the other players and you think, well, if 2 people are on him, that should leave somebody free further infield. And there's not really that synergy between the attacking players at the moment. I have felt the last couple of games he's looked a lot better incidentally when Callum Wright's played in the 10, because it's almost like he knows Callum Wright. They know each other. They work well off each other. And look, Callum Wright, he isn't the most talented player in the Championship, far from it, but he will try for you. And one thing you can't say about him is he's never going to put in 100%. And he has sort of fell off. I thought he was better second half against Portsmouth when Callum Wright came on. But the issue is I've noticed that him and Rami Al-Hajj are sort of treading on each other's toes a little bit. They're sort of getting in each other's way. And that comes with building partnerships. But, we were so reliant on Morgan Whittaker last season. And, it's noticeable this year that he's only got the 3 goals, sorry, because he got that winner against Blackburn. But we just need a little bit more. He's getting back the defending and things. He's getting back for the team. He's trying to do that all-round side of the game. But we don't sign Morgan Whittaker to get back and defend in the transition. We sign Morgan Whittaker to get in and around the 18-yard box and get goals. So hopefully that time will come.
Yeah. How much do you think Morgan Whittaker's potentially being affected by sort of some of the tactical decisions? I'm looking at his shot maps and comparing sort of where he's been the last few years, and I'm seeing a lot more from outside the box this season. I'm seeing him a lot less involved in the 6-yard box, a lot less in that sort of 12 yards around the centre of the box. It seems all edge of the area stuff. Is that a tactical decision where you're deliberately having Morgan Whittaker further away from goal to try and create? Has his role changed that much? How do you think Rooney takes a little bit of responsibility for him not quite having the same impact in terms of that switch?
I do wonder, Ollie, if in trying to improve his all-round game, we have somewhat hamstrung his actual attacking output a little bit. You are right. He isn't getting anywhere near the 18-yard box like he was last season. I think, although we agreed on our podcast this weekend that whilst it's not a statistic you can necessarily measure him against, Sky put up a graphic in the Portsmouth game about how long it was taking for him to get shots away. And he's almost 7-8 seconds slower this year in getting shots away than what he was last year. And he is really struggling to sort of get that space, get that pocket of free air, if you like, to pull the trigger. I hope he's not going to develop into a bit of a streaky player. You know, we got Ryan Hardy, who gets one, he'll probably then go and get 5 in 7 or 6 in 8 or something. I hope he's not going to develop into one of them, because we need him to be a little bit more consistent. But you know, he's one of them that it's almost like he now needs one to fly in from 20 yards out, just to give him a little bit of a pick me up.
Engagement then, Joe, for Plymouth Argyle. It seems like I can understand, certainly away from home, and especially in the, you know, I'm conscious of putting too much on the Leeds game, because while I think it was a shocking performance, I do recognise that Leeds United are a fantastic side and it is very difficult to stop them. But I wonder, it's one thing in those tough away games to have a compact, deep defensive shape. But I just wonder, in terms of engagement, let's say even in the defensive third, so nothing up to the edge of the final third for the opposition, but I feel like when I watch Plymouth Argyle, I want a little bit more in terms of letting opponents know that they're in a game and being really aggressive, especially maybe in midfield.
Yeah, we're sort of crying out for that Sam Morsey type midfielder that Ipswich had last season. The little terrier that keeps nipping away at your ankles. We haven't got one. You know, and you are right, Gab. I don't think Wayne Rooney alluded to it after I don't know if it was the Leeds game or the Millwall game, that we need to be tougher. We need to be more mentally smart, if you like, in games. You know, if someone's on the half turn, just pull the shirt, just stop them, take the free kick, because Millwall do that to us and other teams do that to us, but we don't reciprocate it. And it's almost like we are a little bit too nice. And that was the one thing about the Leeds game. A little bit in the second half, we did become a little bit more aggressive out of possession. By then, the game's gone and it's, you know, they're making changes, they're bringing youngsters on, they've given up the ghost. So we were always going to get that little tiny morsel bit more of the ball. But we were just stepping up a little bit. And, you know, at home, it's fine. You know, we all know what home park's like. The home form's great, but we can't rely on it. And therefore, when we go away to grounds, we are going to have to be a little bit more aggressive. The one thing I will say moving forward into the rest of the season is already this year, we can now forget about going to Ellen Road, the Hawthorns, Turf Moor. You know, these are grounds that you would anticipate we aren't going to get anything from, and they're out of the way. You know, so we've got to look at that and think, right, in the second half of the season, we're going to have easier away trips. The problem with that is the home games are going to be tougher because we're getting all those teams coming to us, and therefore it's going to put pressure on the away form. We simply cannot go until the first weekend of February without an away win. We got away with it last year, and I don't quite know how. It took us until February the 3rd, February the 4th to win at Swansea. No, I think it was Swansea was first up. We can't do that again because it's just not going to happen. This is a league where everybody is taking points off everybody unless you're Leeds, Sunderland, and Sheffield United. So we're going to have to really dig in games, and we are going to have to get more physical and get in teams' faces a little bit more. Because as supporters, that's all we want to see. We just want to see application. They didn't get it at Leeds, and I felt for every single one of them in that away end. But you know, they saw it a little bit at Derby, and if we see that a little bit more in the next block of these crazy run of games, then we might be a little bit more fortunate.
Yeah, it's one of them. I'm just looking at the fixtures now and looking at that sort of run of away games. It don't get any easier, does it, when you look through them sometimes? Because you've got Norwich, who I think lost for the first time at home in a long time last weekend. Bristol City, who've only lost once at home, and that obviously was a 96-minute winner. Then you come to Bramall Lane, then you're at Coventry. So you're sort of looking at that game at the end of December away at Oxford and thinking that's the one that you need to put a lot of your stock into. It's almost, it does feel as though when you look at these games, they start to get ominous when you get to this time of the season. So getting that monkey off your back, getting the win as soon as possible, anyway, anyhow, feels really important just to make sure you've got a little bit of belief going into some of these other games.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's why Saturday's sort of last 20 minutes was just a little bit frustrating because, you know, Derby took off Mendes Lang, who was probably one of the better players on the pitch just because of how awkward he is. You know, he's the sort of player you'd love to have in your team, but you hate to play up against him. And when they took him off, they sort of lost a bit of their attacking intent. And that's when I was looking at us and thinking, right, let's get Andre Gray on the pitch. Let's get somebody else off the bench. And we took off Obafemi and brought on Adam Forshaw. And I'm thinking that, this is where we should be trying to hit a team. But it wasn't to be. And, it's great to get a point, but you are right. The run of games doesn't get easier. I'm sort of hoping that Bristol City will have one of their trademark off days after they have a really good game the week before. But this is essentially what we're relying on, because you would say, looking at those run of games, Norwich is going to be incredibly tough. Bramall Lane's going to be incredibly tough. Coventry will obviously have the new manager in. That will probably give them a lift. So that Oxford game's looking bigger by the minute.
Certainly is. Joe, I want to ask you, I'll come on to January because I think that could be an important window for Plymouth Argyle. But between now and then, can you give me a sort of practical solution that you think Wayne Rooney's got to look at in terms of just getting getting you by until then? Because I'm not sure that the performance levels on balance that we've seen so far are going to get you the same sort of points tally that you've accumulated so far, because I think you've maybe been a little bit fortunate to have the number of points that you've got on the board.
Yeah, the issue we've got, Gav, is the last two home games have been really poor performances. Preston, we didn't deserve a goal, let alone a draw. I mean, that's as bad as it's been for a number of years at home. It should have been a cricket score by the hour mark. Portsmouth wasn't great either. So that's the first thing, because home park is our backbone, essentially. We're fortunate enough that Lewis Gibson comes back straight after the international break. So that potentially then, given Julio Pleguezuelo's played okay in the 3 games last week, that potentially opens up the door to maybe play 3 at the back away from home. Which for a lot of this squad is a system they're very comfortable with.
Sure.
Whereas at home, I think playing the 4-3-3 is probably something that will suit us better than 3 at the back at home. Other injury wise, I don't think we're going to get too many back after the international break, which is a bit of a kick in the teeth. But you're right, you're looking at key positions like the right back position with Joe Edwards out until January, Ibrahim Sissoko's out until January. If we lose one of Hardy, Gray, or Obafemi, then all of a sudden we're back down to 2 strikers. You look at the midfield, and Randall and JB had potentially their best games on Saturday, but if one of them goes down, you're back to relying on a Forshaw or a Houghton. So it's very delicate. I'm incredibly nervous about left back position as well, because Barley Mumba's been immense.
Mumba looks. I'm not sure Mumba's a left back.
No, he isn't. But he has been absolutely immense these last couple of games. I'm not quite sure how he's managed to last all of them, given how much energy he's put into it. But you are right. He is going to get found out.
Joe, I think Ballymumba's one who would benefit from going to a wing-back system.
Possibly, yeah, because that's where he was served best under Steven Schumacher. I'm kind of hoping that Brendan Galloway can come back pretty quickly after the international break. He can go to left back, and Barley Mumba could then potentially slot into where Ibrahim Sissoko was playing a bit further forward. Because the start of last season he was on the one side of Hardy, Whittaker was on the other, so that would reignite that link up. But you're going to come on to it in a minute. We just got to get through to January, Gab, because at the moment the squad's not good enough.
Well, let's finish off on January then, Joe, because I want to hear from Clive from Loft for Words in a few moments. But I wanted to ask you, what are are we looking at 5 or 6 players to come in January? Is that realistic? Do you think there's going to be the money for those kind of additions?
I think it's needed. Whether or not it's actually realistic and something that can pan out, I'm not convinced at all. I presume we're going to have a fans forum in the next 3-4 weeks, because I know Simon Hallett's going down to Cornwall to meet the supporters down there. So I presume there'll be something at home park, and that is going to be the only question that's going to be asked.
You've set me up for such an obvious Exeter City gag. I'm going to try and fight myself to avoid it.
Don't, Gab, don't do it. But there's the answer is, where is there going to be money for Wayne Rooney to change this squad in January? Because we desperately need depth. This last sort of week, 10 days, 2 weeks has highlighted just how weak the squad actually is. We're having to patch it up and get through. I certainly think we need probably another fullback on either side. We'll definitely need that hard midfielder and to just get in there and put his body in there, get tackled.
A Ben
But these players are
Pearson
hard.
type.
These players are hard to find on our budget. That's the issue, and we keep hearing this I word that keeps getting banded about that every other club seems to get in investment, but us. And we're in desperate need of it because it's admirable to try and compete in the Championship by the means we are, but modern football's evolved so much in the last 10 years, it doesn't happen very often. And clubs like Luton and Bournemouth and Brentford, whilst they did it essentially, they also had backing towards the end of that plan, and we aren't getting it.
Brentford recruited a lot in terms of player sales.
Yeah.
I think that makes a big difference. Just
and
finally, Joe,
very
what do you
very
think
quickly, Gab, and they did recoup that in player sales, and Ollie only gave us 2 million for the best keeper in the Championship. So
yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, go and get promoted. We'll have that other $250,000 you owe us.
To be fair, Joe, we won't pay it anyway, so don't worry about it.
Joe, just finally, it's been great to have you on this evening. But just for that fans forum that you mentioned, what sort of a mood are you anticipating? A respectful mood, a bit of a restless mood? Some opinions going to be voiced. How are you feeling like it's going to play out?
I think it'll be an interesting one. It'll be a tense one, possibly more tense than we've had in recent months and seasons. Look, I don't know if there is going to be a fans forum. I just presume there is because he's going down to meet the supporters in Cornwall. So I presume he will hold an event at Home Park while he's here, because the financial results will be out, and they normally do one around that, so they can explain we're getting all this money, but this is what we're going to invest it in rather than the team. So, it's going to be interesting. The questions will be asked because they need to be asked. They put out this statement in the week that we got fined 45 grand for pitch invading against Hull, and we're being warned that it's going to impact on player trading. That's an alarm bell ringing in my head straight away. So, it'll be an interesting one. I just hope to God, I feel sorry for Rooney. I've said this to you a couple of times, Gab, that the injuries the last few weeks have really hamstrung him a lot. And I just hope that in January he gets the opportunity to get bodies in, to give us every chance we've got in that second half of the season, because it's going to be a war of attrition at the bottom this year. And you've got 4 or 5 people coming on tonight. I think you could probably add another 4 or 5, and then you've probably got what will look like the relegation picture at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So the good thing is, as a fan base and as a
we wanted to have. We wanted to. So go on.
I was just going to say, as a fan base and as a venue like Home Park, we're going to have our sleeves rolled up and we're going to make it as uncomfortable as we can for everyone coming down here to give us the chance.
Absolutely, I'm sure you will do. We wanted to have a fan of each of the clubs who could go down from the Championship this season, but we haven't got 3 hours, so
no, exactly.
It's going to be very interesting. Listen, Joe, thanks so much for joining us this evening. Keep up the great work on Argyle Life and on the Green and White podcast, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you soon.
Cheers, lads. Have a great one.
Top man, Joe.
Top man. Cheers. Delighted to be joined now by Clive from Loft for Words. Good evening, Clive. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, mate.
You're an apprehensive hoop at the moment?
Yeah. Music to kill yourself to at QPR again. I'll try and keep it as swear free as I can for the next 15 minutes. But yeah, it's gone in a very QPR direction.
You're an elective mute now, then, are you, Clive?
Yeah, it's gonna be a struggle, man. I've had to write some other words down here. It's like maybe this one instead.
What do you think is the biggest challenge that QPR have right now?
We're not very good, and so I would say that's problem one. There's no goals in the team, which we did suspect. Like pre-season, I think our last 4 friendlies we didn't score a goal, and you kind of dismiss that because you played Tottenham, Brighton, Fulham, but we also lost 1-0 at Reading, and it's been pretty obvious that goals were going to be a problem in the team. Mishi Frey's top scorer with 4. I'm not sure he knows how he's got 4 goals and he's injured now anyway. I think our team on Saturday at Leeds collectively doesn't have 4 goals between them. So yeah, there's no goals in the team. I think we've only scored more than one in 2 games, Sheffield United and Luton. And that was both back in August. So we've scored 1 goal or fewer in every game since. Lowest scorers in the league apart from Swansea, I think. So that's a pretty obvious problem. Injuries, I think the last time I came on here, I said I think we could still be okay if a few of the new signings settle in and get up to speed, and we get Chair, Jake Clark-Salter and Colback back in down the spine of the team, we could still be okay. Chair and Clark-Salter reappeared briefly, got re-injured and are now out, apparently medium term. Colback's just disappeared off the face of the earth, and we've lost 4 or 5 others to injuries. Frey, Kenneth Parr, the left back, and we don't have another left back. Dembele, we hear, is basically done until March. I mean, obviously the fans are completely insignificant at QPR, so we're not allowed to know how long these players are out for, but by all accounts, none of them are due back anytime soon. So,
yeah, I mean, to be fair, I can kind of understand.
Yeah, it's tough going.
Sorry, a bit of a delay on the line. I mean, I would probably defend the club in terms of being cagey with injury information, because you don't want to give opposition managers a head start in terms of team news and match preparation and all that kind of stuff. But so I can understand it from that point of view. But those injuries you mentioned there, especially given how tight funds are going to be in January, that's a massive worry, isn't it?
Yeah, we spent our money in the summer on the 10 players that were bought from the analytics that the club are basing their recruitment on, all from European backwaters, all but one of them under 25, and at the moment, no successes among them. They all look, I mean, apart from Koki Saito, who's giving it a bit of a go, they all look completely out of their depth at this level of football. And, there's big questions about how they were identified, what sort of questions we asked other than their data looks good. It's not just the injuries they're keeping quiet, Gab. It's the length of contracts, the amount of money they've spent. We're allowed to know nothing. They've just completely shut up shop communications-wise, hidden Cifuentes away, and we're just expected to suck it up. Another 1,500 of us went to Leeds at the weekend. We're selling out every game, and the fans are being just treated with contempt by the chief executive. For me, I think it's appalling, particularly with the support that we've given the club over the last 3 years. I think it's very, very poor. And when we come to talk about January, I would be very, very reluctant now, if I owned QPR, to let this chief executive and head of recruitment have another swing at another transfer window in January, given what they've done with the one just gone.
Speaking of, obviously, some of the issues around the chief executive, around the ownership, around the structure, seeing some really concerning reports today, and I don't know whether there's any validity in them, whether there's any conversations about it. I did note that I think it's come from the Get Football Now website, which, if I understand, your owner used to be one of the founders of, was the only reason I would give it any kind of sort of validation. But some suggestion that you're starting to talk to other managers, looking around to see whether or not they're, I think Gregory Vignal is being talked about quite a lot. Where do you stand with Martí Cifuentes? Do you think he's just being hamstrung here by what's happening around him and the structure at the club? Or do you think it would be sensible for the club to be thinking about a change?
I don't think Martí Cifuentes is the problem. I think he's been hamstrung with the players he's been given and the injuries. I think it's the obvious thing to do. It's the quickest and cheapest thing to do to change the manager. But again, I wouldn't be in a rush to let this chief executive have another swing, at appointing a manager, because I think that the problems are above Cifuentes, and I feel quite sorry for him, really. We're not getting results because the recruitment hasn't been very good and all the players are injured. I don't see that either of those things are his fault. This Vignal story, I've got everything crossed that I think it might be a coincidence. Usually when I say things like this, the opposite happens. But Vignal used to be on Régis Lebris's coaching staff, I think, in France. And the reports seem to be more based on the fact that he was at the Sunderland game. He could just have been there watching Régis Lebris, seeing his old mate. So I've got my fingers crossed, because his CV for him to come in as that would need to go very well very quickly. Otherwise, people would get very aggy. But I'm hoping, people are putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5 with that one. I mean, David Wagner was at the Sunderland game as well. At this time, when your manager's under pressure, there's going to be lots of ghouls hanging around the director's box. It's just the way it is. So I've got everything crossed that it's just a massive coincidence with this Vignal. I don't think Cristian Nori is involved with the Get France Football or whatever website anymore. I think they've just picked it up from Le Quip. So I've got everything crossed that everyone's losing their mind today over just nothing. But nothing would surprise me at QPR at the moment. So maybe, but I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that it's just a massive coincidence.
Fingers crossed. I wanted to ask you, Clive. You mentioned earlier, I know that you're very much pro Cifuentes, and I completely understand and sort of respect that, given everything that he's had to deal with upstairs. Fantastic job last season he did. I'm wondering, is the fan... last time you came on, you mentioned that the fans were very much shared your point of view in terms of supporting Cifuentes and feeling like he'll get it right and it's problems elsewhere that are really holding QPR back. Is that still the common consensus, that Cifuentes is the right man for this situation?
I mean, there's obviously some dissenting voices, and it's not like he hasn't made mistakes, and it's not like he isn't stubbornly sticking to some things that aren't working. When you're still stubbornly bringing 11 men back for corners in the 92nd minute away at Leeds when you're 1-0 down, I mean, that's just being stubborn for the sake of it. Picking Heverton Santos, who they signed in the summer as a right back, immediately decided was a rubbish right back, so got another right back. Picking him at left back against Ben Doak in the Middlesbrough game, that's just asking for trouble. So it's not like he's not making mistakes, but I think if you look around Twitter and our message board, there's been a few votes and polls about who's to blame and what would you do. And Cifuentes is coming out pretty universally, in favour of it not being his fault and don't get rid of him. He's got a lot of credit in the bank from last season. So it's not like he's not making mistakes. But again, what are the two primary problems with our team at the moment? It's the way the recruitment went in the summer and the amount of injuries we've got. Neither of those are his fault. So it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, look, I've sat here this afternoon and basically written his exit piece. So, because it just feels inevitable, really. And that's not a piece you want to be writing at 2 a.m. in the Premier Inn in Cardiff a week on Tuesday. So I've started writing it because it just feels inevitable. But I don't think it's his fault. And I think that view, I never try and speak for all QPR fans, but I think that view is pretty widely held, that I don't think it will go down well if and when they pull the trigger.
Yeah, it could be that they're looking for a sort of a scapegoat when really the problems are sort of elsewhere at the club. Clive, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope somehow things improve for QPR for next time you speak to us.
Well, you're going to have to introduce me to some League One people, Gab, I think.
Top man, Clive, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Clive. And fingers crossed for something else.
Delighted to be joined now by Cristian from the Hallenbach podcast. Good evening, Cristian. How are you?
Yeah, hiya, gents. Yeah. It's one of those, isn't it? Yeah. It's going to be an interesting one.
That's the thing with these relegation podcasts. We're used to be being joined by fans of a slightly downbeat mood. How are you feeling about things at Hull City this season?
Feels like 2 years ago, if I'm honest with you. When Preston originally took over, obviously he was very involved, and a lot of high hopes, a lot of excitement around the club. The kind of the appointment though with the Schulte at the time, and pretty similar time of year really, it just feels the same kind of issues management wise at the moment, and it's a tricky thing to get around for a lot of fans at the moment, because a lot's being said, but it feels like not a lot's being heard at the moment, and there's a lot more questions than answers coming out of the club currently. And I think that's one of the most concerning things at the moment, because it's not just the home fans which are seeing what's going on at the club at the moment, it's everybody else around. And being a Hull fan, it's one of those where it's embarrassing in a little bit, It is 3 home wins in 2024. Only 3, the whole of the year so far. And I think the last time we had a clean slate at home, or even a clean slate, 15 games. 15 games without conceded. You know, it's very concerning, and especially after the kind of the transfer window that we had as well. It was a big rebuild. We all expected a big rebuild. We all expected it to be really, really hard. It wasn't anything to shy away from. I think losing Liam at the end of last season after finishing 7th hit a lot of fans hard. It really did, and it was a surprise to everybody. It was a surprise. It came out the blue. You can't fully argue with what the owner's saying, the reason why, because it was very defensive. It wasn't very attacking. It was a lot of passing backwards. And with the team he had and the plays he had, I mean, wow, what a squad we had last season. I mean, it was unreal. I mean, look where the guys are playing now.
Though, Cristian.
Sorry,
you didn't have a striker though. Other than
not really. No, we didn't really have a striker, but with the team that we had around it, we were able to build and actually get the goals from everywhere. And especially if you think about it from around, the second half of the season. I mean, we had the Lap, who was just, well, look at him now.
Yeah.
I mean, Fabio as well, he came out, like Cavallio was just, at first people were like, he ain't doing enough. And then all of a sudden, something clicked. And that was it. He was on fire. He was linking up. I mean, come on, the lad was getting goals and he was being sent here, there and everywhere and wasn't getting a look in. It came to us, and then all of a sudden, a big money move away from Liverpool. And it's crazy to think how we ended last season, but I still do understand the reason why Ajin got rid of Liam. Okay. But it was the promise. It was the promise that came after it. But when he brought Tim in, the promise was exciting, butts off seats, crazy football. And he started bringing out Tim's record of goals. And I think his average was 2 goals a game. And it was exciting to hear, But it's more defensive than Liam Rosenior is. The ball goes backwards. It's crazy. I mean, yeah, it's really upsetting to see that something where it's come across and said, we play from the back, but you're not playing from the back. You're actually playing to the back now. And with 22 players going out the door and 18 coming in, I mean, what club's done that? I can't think of another club that has had that big of a turnaround. And now the injuries that we've received.
And also, it's not like you had the 18 out and 22 out and 18 in May and June. It was July, it was August. All of it. Business was being done, so it's like very close to the start of the season. So that didn't help at all.
And that's the thing. Like, you're thinking with all those transfers that we were getting in, obviously it's a rebuild. People have got to get to know each other, new management, new coaching staff. So we look, us fans were patient with that. We understood.
Yeah,
and if we saw glimpses, don't get me wrong as well, Ajin gambled. And he seriously gambled in the transfer market. He held off for that one quality striker and he failed massively. He humongously failed. There's no, I don't want to insult our strikers that we've got at the moment, but they can't do it. They're not the type of striker to suit Tim's system anyway. And God, we've spent more on getting decent goalkeepers in than we did getting the forwards, which is just crazy.
Yeah, I think in terms of the style of play, what I noticed about the way Tim Volter's side play, and I can see why it looks quite boring, because so much of the football is the defenders having all of the possession and the goalkeepers, and it not really progressing. But I also feel that and maybe you can tell me in more detail, Cristian, when Hull City are, because the way that you play, you don't involve the midfield in early build-up play. So it means exactly. So it means that when the midfielders do get the ball, they're already turned and in a position to create, and it's much easier for them. The game's opened up because the defenders have bypassed the press on their own. So when you can get the midfielders in the game, they can create, and all of a sudden, sometimes you see Balumi's got loads of space, or Kamara's in oceans of space, and you can create those sort of artificial transitions. But because for much of your game is just those defenders circulating the ball in some sort of narrow shape, it doesn't look very exciting, other than those moments where you are able to sort of accelerate and get it a bit further forward. But I suppose what I'm wondering is if you can start to progress the ball past the press a bit more consistently, does the style then start to look a little bit better than it does at the moment?
The style suits the final third. The style suits the final third when you're in the opposition half. But when you're with the ball in your own half and you're trying to build that way, and you're missing a midfielders to actually be your anchor point, your spine, you have no spine. So the only directions you go in are out wide. And other teams are catching on to that very, very easily with the high press against our back line as well. I mean, what is it? Touches for the goalkeepers in the league. I think in second place, it's something like 117 touches for a goalkeeper, whilst Ivan Pandor, for us, is just shy of 400 touches. You know, that... if your strikers aren't getting that, but your goalkeeper is, there's a big, huge problem.
Chris Media's had about 10.
Exactly. There was a stat that came out on the Derby game, and it was something along the lines of we had like 70% possession of the ball. And they broke it down individually of the percentage of who touched the ball. And our two centre-backs were mid to high 30s of like, between of touching the ball. But our central midfielders was 1.4%. Now, if your attacking players aren't getting the ball, then I don't understand the style of football, because obviously the goal is to win and give it to those up top. If you're not going to get a goal from your goalie or your centre-backs unless it's a set piece, of course. And this is where it's getting a bit, for every fan watching, I don't just want to say boring, but frustrating. It is really frustrating to see. And now we've lost our very two main attacking threats with Miller. I mean, thank God his surgery went okay today. He's just posted. But he's out for the season. And now we've lost Balumi with the exact same injury for the rest of the season as well. I mean, Balumi was off to a flyer. Now, I will say Balumi was a great purchase. I really will. He's very attack-minded, runs with the ball, not afraid to take on players. But now we've lost that. And we're now having to fill in our wide with more central players, such as Omar, who is easily...
He likes to drift infield, doesn't he, Omar?
He likes to drift, yeah, he does. I mean, his last game out wide on the left for us was his best game ever for playing left. But it doesn't suit him. He is definitely someone who needs to be in the centre of the park. We do have Kamara, but there was all the praise around him. And yes, he's being played on the left. But everyone's telling us we're crazy. We need to play him out on the right. But it was pretty hard to bang him out on the right. With Balumi playing at that time. But even when he was on the pitch, he just looked like he didn't give any effort whatsoever. And I think that's where other little frustrations are coming from the fan base as well, because now he's starting to see players turn as well. We don't think they're buying into Tim's style. And it just feels like 2 years ago. We're at the stage of where the reports are Ajun and his kind of brain team for the club are currently having a meeting about the future of Tim. It's all over the place. And every morning, I can tell you now, it's not just me, because I read it everywhere and I communicate with everybody. The first thing we do when we wake up in the morning is to check to see if Tim's still at the club. It's not good when your fan base is waking up to check those things. Will we turn it around?
Yeah. Yeah,
we've got the players, but
yeah, Christmas is coming up. I'm almost feeling like there's going to be more than one team I'm feeling sympathy for over the festive period. But listen, Cristian. What is the solution? Either for Tim Volter right now, or for another manager who may or may not come in. Can you give me a practical solution for how?
I mean, look, it is. If Tim was more flexible and understood the players that he had around him and utilized his players to their abilities, you might get some up. That's for Tim. But unfortunately, Tim is extremely stubborn and he thinks his way is the best way. And there is no other way to play football. And if you're not flexible and understand the players that you have, I mean, we still don't believe that Tim actually knows who his best 11 is. And unfortunately, with all our injuries, I don't think the fans know the best 11 at the moment.
Sure.
I mean, we can name centre backs because we've seen them play that many times, and we can name.
Well, I like Charlie Hughes, Cristian.
Hughes,
I think he's a very
brilliant. Hughes is brilliant. It was a shame it took him a long time to get in. At the start of the season, obviously fitness wise and things like that. And he's a very fair substitution when he came on. Unfortunately, he gave away a bit of a stink of a goal. But then again, we were playing against a very good opposition at the time. It was just one of those. But ever since then, Hughes, he's a player. And give him a few more years, and he's going to be pretty much what happened with Greaves. We'll struggle to hang on to him.
Yeah.
He's going to go to the Premier League. He's that type of player. He's brilliant. I think the only other option at the moment is Adrian needs to hear the fans, because Tim has lost the fan base. He has completely lost it, especially after his comments after the Portsmouth game. Is there going to be a fans forum coming up, Cristian? Rumour has it there might be one next week. Rumour has it, but it's a rumour at the moment in time. Now, Adrian loves doing a bit of a fans forum now and then. Unfortunately, his last few got a little bit heated, but unjustified. This time, there's a bit of justification behind it. And it's one of those where Adrian stayed really quiet at the moment, which is just not the best. We need to hear from him. I still think Adrian Nilagella is a net positive for Hull City. I think the club's long-term prospects are greater with him as owner than they were without him as owner. So I think the broader perspective has to be considered here. But I also think, yes, you're within your rights, because I don't think the handling of the dismissal of Liam Rosenior, whether you agreed with that or not, the timing of it, appointing a head coach pretty late in the summer and then doing all that transfer business, I think it's probably the wrong way to go about it in terms of giving yourselves the best chance for this season, and then staying as quiet as he has done this year. So, I agree, some questions need to be asked, but also with respect to what he's done for the club in terms of the bigger picture. Yeah, and that's the thing, going back to Liam. Would Liam have done as good as a job as Tim has? Oh, yeah, there's no chance. If you'd stuck with Liam Rosenior, there's no chance you'd be in the current position. Exactly, and that's the thing. Even though with a full rebuild, Liam had the players. You could see the players wanted to play for Liam. When you're watching this, you just see the players don't want to play for Tim. And I mean, obviously he's lost the fans. I think the last home game that we just had was the worst home attendance we've had this season so far. So it means, I mean, come on, if it's on the figures that you're not getting the fans into the stadium on a Sunday as well, the most easiest day to go and watch a game. And the way Adrian's restructured the ticket pricing and the membership, you should be pretty much selling out on a Sunday. You should. And it's really concerning at the moment until action is taken and then someone comes in, because someone else is going to have to come in to change it up and to listen to the players and the fans. Unfortunately, we don't have that. No. Well, listen, Cristian, a difficult moment for Hull City, and hopefully the solutions can be found. Thanks so much for joining us, and keep up the great work on the Hull and Back. Cheers. Cheers, guys.
Delighted to be joined now by Matt from the 1927 podcast of Cardiff City World. Matthew, thanks so much for waiting, first of all, because I realised that we've kept you. Talk to me about, firstly, Omar Ritza's interim reign overall, and then the back-to-back defeats that have just nudged you down to 20th.
Yeah, the back-to-back defeats. I just think there's been a lot of tired legs. We've struggled a lot with injuries. We just haven't had that strength and depth, really. And, when you're playing 3 games in the space of 7 days, not having that strength and depth can really affect you. And I think, when confidence maybe isn't at the high, it can, the international break has come at the right time for us. But, saying that, the results prior to that, if somebody had said, when Bullet had gone after the first 5 games, when we'd only scored 1 goal in the first 5 games, 4 defeats and a draw, to kind of flip the chart, then, shall we say, and then go 9 games. I think it's 3 defeats, 4 wins, and 2 draws. We would have bit somebody's hand off for that, really. So I've been really impressed with the way Omar Ritza has come in. Well, I say come in. He's been there since the start of the season. So for me, it's frustrating in the sense that he knew that we were able to play the brand of football that he's trying to play, but whether or not it was a bit of Errol Bullet is my way or the highway type of thing. Obviously, there was a bit of an issue there between them, I think. And yeah, that's the frustrating thing for me as a fan, I think, knowing that he was there from the start. Why couldn't we have implemented that kind of the way we're playing now, which is a more attacking type of football, really?
Yeah, I'm wondering, in terms of that 3-1 home defeat to Blackburn Rovers, one thing that really stood out to me was that you had Darland, your left-sided centre-back, being caught really out of position for one of the goals. And I think it was because Callum O'Dowd at left-back was caught so high up the pitch. And it was almost as if Darland was playing on the left of a back 3, when really he's a centre-back in a back 4, where you've got to be a lot more disciplined. So I'm wondering, is that, and I think another goal you conceded was a result of Gutas being caught out of position. So do you have an issue at the moment with centre-halves being caught out a little bit at the moment?
Our defence, since Ritza have come in, our defence, he's changed it up a bit. Jack Arnick has been our mainstay in goals. He has controlled our back 4. I think in the Ritza reign, we've had 4 clean sheets. Callum Chambers and Gutas have been the mainstay in our defence. Obviously, Chambers pulled out early doors on Saturday morning through illness. So that's a big miss straight away. Darland hasn't been, he's been in the squads and things, but he hasn't played much football. And yeah, I just think it was one of them things, he's ring rusty, coming straight into the team. Like I said, caught out of position. And, as well as I do, you come up against an half-decent side and you can't afford to make their mistakes in the Championship, because you will get punished.
With some of the fitness issues that you've raised there, you talked about the injuries and some of the sort of lack of squad depth. Obviously on Sunday, it's just the 1 sub made, and that was made at half time, obviously not trying to change anything through the second half. Do you think that Ritza is managing the squad properly in terms of making sure that they're spreading those minutes, that players aren't being run into the ground? Or is it just necessity that said, we actually haven't got anything to come off the bench, so we've not got any options here?
I suppose there's a couple of different ways you can look at it all, really. I think at the end of the day, he's still fighting for a contract. So he wants his strongest side out, as much as possible. I think fans have been crying out. We've got a couple of good youngsters in the 21s who've got the ability maybe to make that step up. But I think, having conversations on the 1927 podcast and things with my co-host Reese, I think he's been afraid to use them youngsters. Because, like I said, he wants to go with the tried and tested method of using the players he knows who's been there and perhaps done it. So, yeah, it's been a difficult one. It's been nice that we've been able to pick a consistent squad up until maybe last week or the week before. But I think it's definite. He definitely needs to improve that area where, bringing the subs off. And to be honest, I think we've lacked people on the bench who can make an impact coming off the bench. You mentioned Callum O'Dowd earlier, Gab, playing on the left. He's been brilliant for us. He's a quality player, but I would much prefer...
Is he a quality left back though, Matt? In a back four?
He's doing a job for us, if I'm honest. I would like to see him further up the field, really, if I'm completely honest. El Ghazi has started the last few games. I haven't been bowled over with him, if I'm completely honest. But going back to Joel Bagan, he came in, he had a couple of games, done really well, kind of went out of the picture then. But I would have, me personally, and this is my opinion only, I would much prefer to have had Bagan playing left back, who was an out-and-out left back. Have O'Dowd playing further up on the left, and then have El Ghazi, who is capable of moments of magic, coming on maybe the last 15, 20 minutes until he's up to, match speed and fitness. Because at the moment, for me, he just loses the ball too easily.
Yeah, well, Matt, can I just come in there? Because I also think, I don't know if this is accurate, but my perception of Chris Willock and of Anwar Al Ghazi is that they're a little bit luxury players. I think there was a bit of a question mark over Willock from an attitude point of view at the end of his time with QPR, much though he did produce some real magic for them in the first couple of years there. And Al Ghazi, I've sort of wondered about the same from an application point of view, whether he's quite at it. And so from that point of view, I would kind of wonder whether having both of them in the starting 11 might be a little bit risky, perhaps. And maybe, like you say, maybe you're better off just having one of them, having Colwell in the 10 and O'Dowd on the left.
Yeah, potentially. But again, going back, I think it's a difficult one with the injuries and things we've got and in key positions as well. You think we've got Aaron Ramsey out, Joe Rolls out, Isaac Davis, Keon Atete. There's no doubt there's a few others as well that I've missed there. But yeah,
would those players really move the needle for you, though, Matt, in terms of the best 11?
Isaac Davis, if I'm
is Joe Rawls still like a top championship midfielder, or is he still one of your best players? Because he certainly was a few years ago.
For me, I'd say he's a good squad player. He'd be good to have in and around the squad for me, to be honest. Obviously, he's our captain. Played over X amount of games. Off the top of my head, I can't think, but I should really know that. But I just think you need to have them types of people in and around the building, really, for me, for the youngsters to look up to. But yeah, another one, if the nitty gritty, the last 10, 15 minutes, you need to put him on to do a job, he'll do a job for you. I think under Bullet, maybe Joe Rolls was playing with Siopis and we just lacked that creativity in midfield. We weren't creating anything. We've been lucky this season to have Alex Robertson come in.
Yeah, I like Robertson.
Looks a real prospect. Obviously, it's still early doors, but some of the performances he's put in so far has been really impressive. And he's kind of he's making a bit of a partnership now with David Turnbull, who prior to this season, I don't really think we've seen the best of him. Bullet was he was one of the managers who would mix it up quite a lot, and I think on a consistency basis then I don't think that's good for players in the sense that they're not getting a consistent run in the team. And I don't think David Turnbull up until maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks ago was having a decent run in the team, but now he is. And it was nice to see him get a goal on Saturday, although he should have buried it first time round rather than the penalty.
Yeah. So that managerial decision then, at the moment, the bookies have Omar Ritza as, I think, 1-20. So clearly from the bookmakers' point of view, they think it's Omar Ritza's job to lose. Is that how the fans think? And well, I suppose there's two questions. Do the fans want Omar Ritza to get the permanent job or until the end of the season? And is there an expectation that that's what will happen?
I would like to see him get a job. He's been open and honest, and he's been passionate about that. He wants it. But the biggest thing for me is the fact that the players have come out and basically said how much they enjoy training with him. What he's put in place and what he's done since he came on board. and that says it all for me, really. Obviously, I know we've had two disappointing results away at Luton and at home at Blackburn. But hopefully, that's a blip, like I said, tired legs and things. But I would like to see him get the job. Whether or not that's until the end of the season, I can't see them giving him a contract any longer than that. If I was Richard, I would probably want the contract longer than that. But obviously, I don't know what goes on in those conversations that happen. But regarding going back to the question, the thing with Cardiff fans, and it's probably the same with every club, you will have a split 50-50 or 75-25. Some will be happy, some won't be. Everybody loves him at the moment, but if we lose the next game again, and everybody be calling for his head, perhaps, I don't know.
What do you think if Omar Ritza does get the permanent job then, Matt? What do you think you're going to need in January? Do you think it'll be a busy month?
I think he's been open and honest and said I don't think it will be a busy month. It's been quite well documented that we're still struggling financially and things. Whether or not he's got contacts so we can bring in some loan players. But I definitely think we need to add in the midfield again. A bit of creativity there. Aaron Ramsey worries me. Obviously, he's never going to get back to the heights that he was. I think we all understand that. But again, he's another great person to have in and around the changing room. But yes, just somebody with a bit more creativity, I think, in the midfield. And a striker.
I think Robertson's creative, Matt.
100%. He's brilliant. Yeah, he's really good. Like I said, the partnership that him and Turnbull have made now, is fantastic, and this is what we've missed, really, if I'm completely honest with you.
Yeah, well, listen, really, broadly a really encouraging interim stint from Omar Ritza on the whole, despite those back-to-back defeats, and I'm sure you'll be back on form and climbing away from that relegation zone soon. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, so best luck, Matt, and thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you, gents. Take care.
Yeah, cheers Matt. And be sure to subscribe to that 1927 podcast. Our final guest this evening is Ollie Hargreaves from the Butter Pie podcast of Preston North End. Looking very smart this evening. You've come straight from work, I imagine, Ollie.
Yeah, directly off the train. Flew home just to get home for this, Gab.
Oh, nice. I appreciate the commitment, mate. Thanks so much for joining us this evening to talk about Preston North End. I'm just wondering how you're feeling as a North Ender right now in terms of the form. Obviously, a 3-1 defeat at Portsmouth last time out. A few concerns after last 2 or 3 results?
Yeah, I think them concerns have probably been a mainstay in the past 2 to 3 years. I probably would have said defensively shoddy. We've known that for quite some time. Woodman also in net hasn't pulled up many trees. He's been here 3 years.
You'd think so, given his name, he would be pulling up trees, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, exactly. But
he's a woodman.
He's been terrible. He's like, I actually think he's the least commanding goalkeeper in the league.
Really?
He flaps at set pieces. He doesn't know where he's at majority of the time within goal. His positioning is woeful. I mean, if you go into our goalkeeping coach, Mike Pollard, where I don't know what he's done. They must not do catching practice in training. I mean, the first corner, why is he punching it? It's a free catch. Doesn't really give much confidence to the defenders if your goalkeeper's punching and flapping at everything. But then,
well, Ollie, can I just come in on that point, because we were talking to a Plymouth Argyle fan and having this conversation earlier about having everyone back from corners, and I wonder if that, like it does for defenders, I wonder if that makes it harder for goalkeepers than easier, because it's hard to judge which balls are yours and which ones belong to your teammates, because it can create sometimes that bit of ambiguity when there's so many players back defending corners.
He just goes for everything, Gab. He goes for absolutely everything. So every ball is practically, his ball in his eyes. And he just flaps at it and misses it. Like the second goal against Portsmouth, if you've seen it, it's diabolical. The ball comes in and he's literally standing on the right-hand side of his 6-yard box out of the goal, and they tap it in at the back post.
But I did watch the highlights, and the one thing that also stood out to me about that, Ollie, was that there was nobody even on the edge of the area for defending that. So yeah, I take your point from a technical point of view on the goalkeeping aspect, but I also feel that you're kind of inviting pressure from the opposition if you're having everyone back, because then that encourages the opposition to put everyone forward. So I think that can make it harder for the goalkeeper as well.
Yeah, I think it's a confidence thing as well. I think it's been noted by Paul Heckingbottom, and I think he's probably just stuck everyone back to give Freddie Woodman more of a chance in terms of it. But I mean, I'm not saying it's all on Freddie, but he's been awful recently. And
Right.
you've got Di Cornell as a backup goalkeeper who, I mean, I've seen some poor keepers in my time at North End. Yeah, it's just no comparison to what we did have, because North End have had quite a few good keepers in recent time. Daniel Everson, who I
you
thought
had
was
Pickford a few years ago, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. You could probably say Rudd was good for a decent period of time. But yeah, he's not having a good time, Freddie Woodman, and then obviously the three in front of him. The more I speak about it, the more it angers me about how it's been known for many years that we've needed improvement, especially if we're meant to play a free back. Heckingbottom's coming and wanting to play a style. He's needing players who want to play the ball. Andrew Hughes hasn't been championship. He's not championship standard, and he hasn't been for the past year. Got a contract extension because we don't have enough funds to be able to replace him. In terms of that, Jordan Storey, fair play. He's a good defender, but he's not a wide centre half. He can't play with the ball as much as you'd want him to. And Jack Watmore, he was poor on Saturday. Obviously, replacing Leon Lindsay, who for me he's an okay centre half. I feel like the system probably does help him, make him seem a lot better than what he is. But yeah, it all comes down to the recruitment. I mean, if you've heard recently, Ryan Kent, obviously a free agent. We've been linked with him quite heavily, which makes the signing of Jeppe Ockels for 1.7 million a bit more of a confusing one, seeing as that money could clearly have been gone into defensive recruits, and you instead decide to splash the cash on a winger who doesn't play.
Sorry, Ollie, I laugh. Ryan Kent was rumoured to Sheffield United in every transfer window that we had Paul Heckingbottom. They must have got the same agent, or they must know each other, because every single transfer window that Ryan Kent's available, he will be rumoured to be joining Paul Heckingbottom wherever he is.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I'd take it. I would. I mean, at this stage, where North End are, where albeit I don't think we'll be pulled into a relegation battle. I think Heckingbottom and Stuart McCall have enough prowess to be able to, guide you away from going into a relegation battle. It just depends on the recruits in January. I think even bringing attacking recruits to help the front three to be able to take a bit of leeway off the defensive duties may be better. I mean, under Heckingbottom, we've conceded 3. I mean, Oxford, we were 3-0 up against Plymouth, conceded 3 there. We've conceded 3 against Portsmouth as well. It's you're not going to win.
These aren't good sides. These are all teams that are going to be in that bottom 6.
Absolutely. And you're not going to win games of football, especially as Preston North End. You're not going to win games of football if you're conceding 3. You're not. I mean, Osmajic is back against Derby, which is an absolute miracle at the moment because Reece is having a turgid time. Although he did score against.
Yeah, it was not a nice cultured finish, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Back,
He just needs some time. time off because all the pressure's been on to him for the past 8 games. He's come under quite a bit of scrutiny, and everyone's been. To be fair, there's been a countdown of games from 8 for when Osmajic is back, and I don't think that's going to fill a striker with much confidence if he's going to be there. But I mean, I can blame all the blame game on, the advisor and to recruitment wise, but I've also got to put some scrutiny down to Paul Heckingbottom, especially this weekend, because that first half was the worst first half I've seen at Preston North End in a long time. Now, Portsmouth, fair play to them. For me, they're nothing special at all. But that was absolutely abysmal. And the mentality of the team, I can't see any leaders in there. Losing Alan Brown, I know he's not probably the leader you think of, but
he probably left because of Ryan Lowe, and he probably would have stayed if he'd known it was going to be Paul Heckingbottom.
Well, put it this way, he took a pay cut to go to Sunderland, so I think that says a lot.
Yeah.
And
a pay cut to leave the club that he wanted to stay at for 8 years?
Yeah, well, he was at the club for over 10. Alan Brown.
Yeah.
And, they came out and gave, obviously the media that we've offered him the highest contract that we've ever offered anyone. I think it was something about 25 grand a week. And then he decides to go, obviously, leave and take a pay cut from his original contract. So I think that says it all. But yeah.
It really worries me, that, Ollie. What you've said there worries me so much because Paul Heckingbottom did a fantastic job at United when things were going well.
Yeah.
He turned us around, he rebuilt the culture, he took us up, and it was brilliant. And he actually seemed to have built a really nice rapport with the players, built a really good culture, and he turned it around really quickly from when he first came to the club. But what you've just described feels like where I was this time last year, watching a team that defensively were a shambles, conceding, well, in our instance, 8 or 5 or 6 fairly regularly. We'd lost all of our leadership on the pitch, and you had nobody who would stand up and take responsibility for turning it around. And you were in a rut that felt like you just were never going to come out of it because you were seeing the same mistakes, the same issues, the same problems week after week with no defensive organisation or solidity. What you've said there just felt familiar, and that concerns me a lot because what I did see last year is that when things had gone wrong, I didn't see a manager who was capable of turning it back around. And so I think the need for Preston to pick up some results, to get some positive feeling, to get some positive momentum, hopefully tied in with Osmajic coming back and just getting that going feels really important because when you're in this rut, I've seen firsthand how hard it is that Heckingbottom finds it to turn that around.
Yeah, it's massive. It is, and it's going to be a tough job. But I have, to be fair, I have quite a lot of confidence in Hecky and obviously Stuart McCall. In terms of some of the draws that we've had at the club, I think we should have beat Sunderland midweek. I thought we were the better side. Plymouth, obviously, you're 3-0 up, you're flying, and then 64 minutes goes, and once the second one goes in from Andre Gray, it's a matter of when, not if, for the third one, and I think that comes down to mentality, and you can't teach mentality from a manager, and he needs to be backed. To be fair, he's come in. Jeppe Ockels came in the same day that Ryan Lowe left for 1.7 million. And then obviously Paul Heckingbottom's been rushed in after Mike Marsh left, and we got beat 3-0 by Swansea and said he didn't want the job. And he got Josh Bowler on a loan, which I'm sure Nottingham Forest are probably paying the majority of the wage there because I think they probably just wanted him off the books. Obviously, there's a buyout clause there as well, so he's been given technically a freebie there. I think they need to recruit defensively in January transfer window. There's no doubt about it. To be fair, if possible, I'd take 3 centre halves and a goalkeeper.
Really, you'd take 3 centre halves and a goalkeeper in January?
I would. I'd sell
over attacking reinforcements.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think we've got attacking reinforcements. I think Mads Rockjaer, I think Sam Greenwood has been our best player this season. I don't understand why Mass has not been playing. You have to get.
I suppose you've got Ryan Ledson in midfield, who I really like. He's very tenacious, isn't he?
Yeah, you've got. Well, I mean, I quite like Ford Arson as well. I thought, although his stats at the moment hasn't been showing, he's got some real good abilities about him. But
he's got a good spring on him, hasn't he? Big Steve.
He has, yeah. And you mentioned Ryan Ledson there. Ali McCann's been good this season as well. Then you have obviously Mass in front of him. You've got Sam Greenwood. You've got Osmajic. You've got a decent, kind of core for attacking players, and you've got Kessler Hayden as well, who's fairly good going forward. I think you've got enough there to be able to push you over the line, albeit if Osmajic doesn't do anything stupid again. But defensive reinforcements are massive, and I think I've mentioned it many times. The best attack, starts from the defence, playing out from the defence. They can't play out from the defence. They can't do it. And it's been meant like if we're after round 10, that's another winger. We don't play with wingers, so he's clearly wanting to go to a back four potentially. And if you've got a back four of Andrew Hughes at left back, Liam Lindsay and Jordan Storey in a back two, which Jordan Storey, fair play, was okay when he played with Ben Davis, but Liam Lindsay's not Ben Davis.
Sure,
it is prime time. So you're going to have to get some decent centre halves. We should have had it in summer. We should have had it the window before that and the window before that. We've known it for a long time. It's negligent that it's been left like this. I think if you look at every team in the league, they probably knew that we needed defensive recruits. We've not done it. It's been left. It'll do job, and it needs to change. And there probably needs to be change at the top. And I think that fans have. It gets brushed under the carpet many times, especially when we're winning or doing okay, reasonably. There needs to be a change at the top. There needs to be someone else. Fair play to Peter. He's probably done an all right job during his time. He's kept us solid. We've paid the tax bill. There needs to be a fresh idea because...
Agreed, yeah.
Because going season to season, there's nothing there. We're not bringing in players to develop. We're bringing in, players who are just trying to stopgap us and keep us in the Championship. And that's not how to run. That's why we're losing 12 million a year, 13 million a year, and the owners can't put more money in because you break FFP rules. So you have to look at the model, and our model is dire. Peter Rizzo came out and said he'd be happy if we got 2 out of 5 signings right. What is that all about? You're looking at it, he's probably got 1 right this summer at this moment in Sam Greenwood. 2 maybe in Kessler Hayden, but he's not coming back next season.
Sure.
And we've got to hope that Leeds don't get promoted to buy out Sam Greenwood. A change needs to happen. And I think fans have, I just hope it doesn't get brushed under the carpet because change has been needing to happen for quite some time at North End, and it's become stale, and now we're regressing, and something needs to change.
Certainly does. Ollie, thanks so much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate your time. I think that just about wraps it up. Ollie, thanks so much for joining us as co-host as well. Thanks to all our guests this evening. This has been the EFL Debate Championship podcast, and we'll see you again next week.
Cheers, Gab.